I'm Paula Eddy Wilcox, and welcome to this episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at the leadership journey of our guest and what unique traits bring them to be the leader they are today. Who knows what we're going to discover together, so I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to this week's episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. This week, I am joined by somebody really different that I've never come across before. This is Nicole Russo, and she is what I can only describe as a personal stylist. And who she hasn't styled even, isn't really worth knowing. I think I'm getting that feeling as I get to know Nicole a little bit more. So welcome to the show, Nicole.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here, Paula. I think this is going to be such an interesting conversation, also very new for me, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, you're so welcome. And when you say new for you, what are you talking about? The podcast space or?
Yeah, I mean, I did one of my initiatives this year was to use my voice more in the literal sense and putting myself out there, particularly with podcasts. So it's been new to me to sort of like come on and speak so often, or more frequently about my journey. But in particular, I meant in regards to leadership and how, I'm used to talking about fashion and styling and from the perspective of, personal presentation as a leader, maybe, but not from my own journey, even though I do feel that leadership and being a leader is so intertwined in it. It's a real big part of like how I've gotten to where I am.
I'm so excited for you, Nicole, in that sense, because it's so funny, isn't it? When you start to dig in how people really have different views of leadership, of course, different approaches, different ways they choose to show up. We know all this, but a lot of people don't think about leadership because they think, oh yeah, corporate job leadership goes over there in that package, that neat package. Whereas for me, it doesn't apply. I've got my own business, and I'm doing all right. Thank you very much. Actually, it takes a whopping amount of self-leadership because we all start with that self-leadership to get yourself started in business. Would you agree?
I mean, I always like to say yes, so completely I agree. And I always like to tell people when they ask, like, well, I want to do this. Where do I get started? Like, what's the secret? Like, how do you do it? Everyone always actually asks that question. And what I believe is, and I didn't know it until I did it, is that, how they always say, just start, like, just begin.
Mhm.
But the reason I believe people should begin is because whatever psychologically is holding you back, whatever fear, whatever resistance, you're not going to actually fully go through until you begin anyway, because no amount of preparation is going to make you avoid that. So and in a sense, you have to lead yourself, you have to guide yourself through that journey of risk, through that point of conflict within yourself, whatever it is, imposter syndrome or scarcity or
Mhm.
social anxieties, whatever they're going to come up, like, and whatever you think it's going to be, it's probably not even going to be what you thought it was. Like, you're going to be in total shock anyway. So certainly, especially when you're being self-employed or entrepreneurial, you're self-guided in a biggest way. And that for me is like my biggest takeaway is starting anything I do now. I just do it because I never know what I'm going to come into. So I just jump in anyway, but just deal with the consequences.
Oh, it's so refreshing to hear that, Nicole, because, we do all have those limiting beliefs, those blockers that can hold us back. And, often if we don't start something, we're never going to find out. We're never going to, as you say, be able to work through those challenges for us. And often not really get to whatever the real challenge is, which is often not the challenge that you foresee before you start something. I mean, if I think back to when I first started my own coaching business, there were a whole list of things that I was worried about. But when I got started, those things faded into insignificance because all these other things kept coming up that was like, oh gosh, I hadn't thought of that. And I thought I was pretty well planned ahead of time.
Yeah, you had no idea that you had much bigger problems you were about to
Yeah.
deal with.
Exactly, exactly. Well, look, delight to have you on the podcast, Nicole. And I'm going to ask you the question that I ask all of our guests on their first episode with us, because of course we've got you for 3 episodes. I feel very greedy and very lucky, all in the same breath. And the first question is, tell us about your leadership journey. How have you got to where you are today, Nicole?
Well, it probably started when I was, like, in daycare because I have no doubt that I was, like, a bossy little minx at every age, let's be honest. And my mother would certainly agree. But there's certain obviously grew up through my childhood taking the charge of things. I was very much the kid who, if I wanted something, I found found a way to, create it. I asked for the job. I pestered my mother, strategized a way to convince the parents to approve. And that sort of led me into, coming to New York from a very rural town in upstate New York. So very country, rural side, cows, like all the things, the trees, but not the people. And, when it came to New York, because I had these, pie in the sky, I had this dream idea of like what New York would be. And it definitely lived up to a lot of it. It also terrified me. Um,
Mhm.
Anyone who knows New York, fun fact. So, um, my uncle lived on 48th and 8th, 48th Street and 8th Avenue. And I used to make him pick me up from the train when I would take the train to him, which was on 34th and 7th. So if you guys can just do that math,
Mhm.
um, yeah. So I was a little bit of a different kid because then, since then I obviously learned, but I always took the train. That was the thing. I still went, even though it scared me. I still like crossed the bridge, took the drive, whatever it was, even though I was usually a nervous wreck because I was in an unknown area, space, I was young. And that really led me on into a lot of different things. I actually believe that sometimes people that are more risk takers or that people that are a little bit more adventurous or big dreamers, they usually typically also make really bad decisions in life. And I don't mean like catastrophic, but I mean that they do things that may at the time feel or look like a failure, but in many ways are part of their self guidance. So for
Mhm.
me, I went to school at FIT where I studied advertising and marketing communications, thinking I'd be a copywriter, was totally in love with the idea of marketing and the creative messaging. And after I graduated, I did not like it. But I was a great way to explain it is like even going into FIT, the reason I even went to FIT is because prior to that, I thought I would be a writer, journalist, and was going to some expensive private college in New York that was going to make me broke. And I knew that. I knew intuitively that I was going to leave school. And this is before we've even in America had the horror stories that people have with student loans. I'm a little bit
Mhm.
on the older side. Like, I'm an elder millennial, as they like to call us. And so I just knew I was like, I'm going to leave college with a mortgage and
Mm.
I'm going to be a writer. I was like, are you kidding? I was like, this is not going to work. So I went to FIT one day with a girlfriend who wanted to go into fashion, and I saw they had an advertising degree, and I saw that they were a SUNY school, and I was like, "Oh, so this is state sponsored? Oh, I think I need to try this one instead." And I transferred, and I took a gap year. I'm sorry,
Mm.
no, I took a 6-month gap because I couldn't. When I transferred, I had to wait until the next semester, the way that they programmed at FIT.
Mm.
So I had to take a semester off, which again, like you think about like I had the discipline and the wherewithal to I got a full-time job in the 6 month in the 3 to 5 months I think it was that I took off. And then got a full-time job, kept myself in New York so I stayed motivated and got back to school. So and then from there, when I graduated, the world fell apart a couple years later with the financial crisis. But I, had had this innate interest in business my entire life. I didn't know it. I read all the blogs. I read all like the marketing materials. I was really into. I even thought about getting my MBA at one point, funny enough, but then again, that went back to that whole mortgage thing, and I was like, I don't know about this.
Not down
And
the mortgage thing, huh?
yeah, I mean, like, I was like, someone wants to gift it to me, I wouldn't say no, but I was like, and I was like, I don't know about this. So I, and then eventually in that, post 2008 collapse situation, I continued to make smarter choices with my life in terms of like, at least the best that I did the best in the moment that I could. And
Mm,
I feel like really confidently, even though looking back, sometimes I feel like I lost a lot of years and my career didn't really start until I was in my late 20s. Really
mm,
did not start. I was until I was in my late 20s. And, you know, when it started and I started styling, I fell into it also through an accident, through also saying yes to opportunities, through self development, self growth. I always had this focus on self improvement. And yeah, some of it did come from a self deprecating, like self loathing place, but a lot of it really came from the curiosity of wanting to become a new person, wanting to be opening up the onions and the unraveling of like what life could look like if you know more. And I read a lot of books and I tried a lot of new things. And that's really what led me to the first person I ever styled who really changed my entire life, and she was a Ivy League grad with like the fancy job. So she kind of represented theoretically the path that I would have taken if I had been
mm.
born into a different world, if I had had maybe a different kind of mentorship. I mean, my parents were very working class. My mother cleaned houses. We were not exactly um, the kind of a typical American New York family where the next generation is sort of set up with this like
Mm,
success where all you have to do is just like keep walking and everything will be great. Like,
yeah.
um, and boom, next thing I know, I'm a stylist and I'm sitting around front row at Fashion Week. And now I do it professionally full time for individuals like that first stylist and other, MBAs.
Fantastic. I wonder if you're going to tell us somebody fabulously famous that you've managed to style over the years.
Well, I mean, when I worked at Net-a-Porter, for example, which was a luxury e-commerce company, we were
Mm,
working with some of the biggest people in the entire world. Um, so I definitely had touch points on a lot of people. Some of them were like wives or of famous musicians. They were famous musicians themselves. They were um, famous authors. Someone that I worked with briefly that I thought was kind of endearing was there's Jenny's Ice Cream, which is a ice cream maker entrepreneur in America. She actually was a client at the time, and I just, to me, like these, and also a very senior executive, C-suite
mm,
executive at Accenture. And it was so incredibly cool to be like responsible day to day with helping these women like go into their boardroom meetings or lead their team and present themselves in confident ways.
mm,
And, I was solving daily problems for people that were like essentially imprinting on the world. And that was such an cool thing to just be that close to these miraculous women. I mean, we focused on women at the time. I style men now as well as women, but in that role, I was only focused on supporting the women in the company who were our current customers. But damn, was that like, I was like, I get to sit at your table? Like, we're on the same table? Okay, I'm sitting next to you. I was like, this is cool. And that, I think, also growing up, that's why I always like feel our lives are really this culmination of all the things we do. That's why in many ways you
mm,
can't really do the wrong thing, like other than like obviously, you know, ruin your life with like some sort of jail time or something, for example.
yeah.
But you can really like make all of these decisions in your life and they culminate in like the perfect place for where you are in that moment. Like when I was in Net-a-Porter, I was a very successful salesperson. I mean, I didn't really fit into the culture really well, to be honest. I did at first, sort of, but then the company grew. It became a little different. We had new management. I didn't really fit in because I mean, there's some like rumors about the fashion industry, and they're not all wrong. So it really wasn't in alignment with my value system. But I took the value system I had. I took the humility I had and the way that I grew up and the fact that I saw my clients as people that really needed support that I could provide a service to through my expertise, just as I do now. But I saw these people, and not like they were just dollar signs for me to like sell expensive stuff to like rich people. I and I think that that translated incredibly well to a very, very successful sales career. And
Mm.
also, I had impeccable client engagement. I had some of the highest, we had these events regularly at the business, and it was notorious that like they became like, I had always the highest number of attendees. And I blame my good attitude and the way that I approached this. And it all came from, you know, the humble upbringings and sort of like the bootstrapping my way into fashion. I mean, by all intents and purposes, there's absolutely no reason I would have been there or should have been there. But that's what makes it cool, I guess.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That is part of what makes it very cool. And that, you know, you've said some lovely stuff there, Nicole. And you know, one of the things that you said, and these weren't quite your words, so forgive me, but something like, you know, a career is a series of trips, falls, and accidents. That kind of idea that actually we don't always get to plan this stuff out. And what you were sharing about, you know, going from what you thought was going to be a writing career, this private university, we'd call it here in the UK, but that college that's very almost elite, to then flipping to that state FIT route that you took, that took you in a completely different direction, to then landing in Net-a-Porter and helping all those different women. I mean, the fact that you had that self-awareness at that time to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm sitting at the table with some pretty important people here. It's just fascinating to hear you share the story and to understand that, yeah, that self-awareness started quite early for you. You know, what did that feel like at the time? You shared a little bit, but share a little bit more about that.
Oh, I mean, well, I definitely am part of, there's a little part of me inside. I was like I was just like
Love
so
it.
excited. Like I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. But like on the outside, I was like, hi, how are you? I'm supposed to like,
Absolutely.
I was like, all
It's
right, like,
the swan on the
but
surface, and the legs are going mad underneath. Nobody needs to see that.
and then it was also, I mean, I don't know how brash I can be on this podcast, but I'll say it as a PG-ish as I can. So I used to always say it doesn't matter like who someone is, how successful they are, how good looking they are. I guarantee their kids don't like them and their partner won't them,
Yeah,
you know?
okay.
So like there's this recent famous, like I don't know how famous it was, but there was this recent interview with Jay-Z and he was talking about how his kids think he's like a big dork.
I
And
love
I
it.
think that like I've always told myself that. I think that like, you know, you can admire someone and still view them as in their humanity. And I think holding on to people's humanity allows you to hold on to yours, which then puts you in the same footing as the individual you're with, regardless of their power or your admiration for them. And I think that I brought that naturally to these women. And I also like, it was like something that's so much fun. Like I was sitting like box seats at like, you know, the US Open, chilling with like, you know, like famous authors. You know what I mean? I was like doing like really cool stuff that I wouldn't even have imagined being able to do. And I didn't take it for granted. I think that was a lot of it. It's like I didn't have those kinds of things when I didn't have those kinds of things accessible to me as a young adult and as a, you know, I was living in squalor at 21 in college. I wasn't living in like a high rise or something. I was a very typical, like poor college student. And then, I didn't have that direction in my initial career. Even though I had a enormous desire to have direction, I felt
Mhm.
very lost in purpose and didn't know what to do and didn't have any real traditional external guidance. So I had to sort of just keep, I was like Dory, just have to keep swimming, keep swimming. And then
Mm.
eventually I found myself like, doing things like, you know, sitting at dinner with Victoria Beckham, and things like that, that were related to this work that I accidentally fell into that I really truly loved.
Mm.
And it
Wow.
really, oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go on, go on.
And I was just saying, like, I really feel like a lot of it came from just never giving up. Like, never really giving up, like, just continuing onward. And even to this day, I still have goals and aspirations. And even on the non-career side, like, I, at the time, was dealing, growing up, one of the things that withheld my, personal development was I did grow up and I had an alcoholic father, and he was pretty absent in terms of like being an emotionally available father,
Mm.
physically available, but emotionally completely unavailable. And that, the trauma of that doesn't really show up until it's showing up sometimes.
Mm.
And it's sort of the way that it, I feel a lot of compassion for people who grow up or who have a lot of personal trauma or personal challenges, severe ones in particular, because it's not even a matter of like dealing with the daily or the weekly or the whatever challenges of that experience. It's the amount of fucking it's the it's the amount of work. Sorry,
This is
y'all.
all child friendly, we know that, so you carry on, Nicole.
Yeah, sorry, excuse me. It's the amount of work that is required of you, financial, emotional, physical time, that to do the healing. I mean, the amount of hours and labor that goes into therapy and doing the work that, other people may not have to do. So a lot of my youth was towards that, but that was a part of my self-development. And it's also one of the reasons why I probably was able to be, I feel, very successful as a person,
Mm.
even though I didn't necessarily start off or achieve career successes at the same scale or at the same point in life than many of my peers.
Yeah. And I think, everything you're talking about here brings, it's making me feel that grounding that you clearly bring around you, that humanity you speak about, and that I'm going to use the word normalness that you bring to situations like having dinner with Victoria Beckham. Everybody else is tripping around. Oh, sorry, oh, I mustn't say this, I mustn't do that. The fact that you're normal, all right, Bex, or whatever you called her, it's probably so, oh, thank goodness for that, for her, that, I mean, I've, in my career over the years, have been very honoured to work with some really famous people in my work with Team GB towards the London 2012 Olympics, for example. Um, you know, there are some divas. There are, without question, there are some divas, but most of them, the majority, just want you to be normal around them. They just want oh, how are you doing this morning at training camp or whatever it was we were doing? You know, they just want to be treated normally. And I suspect from listening to you and picking up on things that you're saying, that really is a big part of why you're successful, Nicole. What are your
Oh,
thoughts on that?
well, thank you. I appreciate that. That was so nice to hear. I do. I agree. I think that even whether I'm working with someone more high profile, like or I'm working with someone who is, I mean, she's a management consultant, or she's working, in her day job at, and she's not necessarily a well-known name, but she's successful and she feels
Mm.
powerful with who she is. But everybody wants to feel like they're accepted. They want to feel okay and being this who they are and being able to feel like comfortable being that person. And so I believe it's true. I definitely believe that people, especially people who are successful in any whatever degree, whether it's career, financial, high profile, they are very used to people wanting something from them,
Mm,
and they are very used to being manipulated or being mistreated or just fangirling, idolizing, which you don't really build you don't build connection uh, through those things. You build connection through the vulnerability of yourself and being confident and comfortable with yourself. When you can show up with the confidence that you are just as equal as those around you, the ones that are around you will see that. Or if they're like, kind of jerks, their jerkness will just bounce off of you. Like you won't even you'll be like, oh my, they will probably become more aware of their own jerky behavior than they will of anything about you. So
yeah. Yeah. And, there are some, to coin the phrase, there are some real jerks I've dealt with over the years, whether that's at C-suite level, in big organizations or whatever else it may be. And, having the tenacity and the self-leadership to be able to, and the humility to be able to handle those kinds of different characters that you come across day to day. Because, as you've just described, you've got the ones that are not in the famous context, but really important in the roles that they do. Then you've got those that are famous. And as you say, people are expecting something from them all the time. But again, in that non-famous context, people are expecting something from the CEO, for example, of a big organization all the time. What can you do for me in my career? I'm sure that's endless. So being able to step up in your own leadership space to manage all of those moving parts and help those people build their confidence in what you're doing for them, in that sort of stylist area is really, I could imagine, very, very valuable to them, because let's face it, how we choose to show up is almost part of the armor that we put on for others to see. So, it really is a massively important piece for people to be able to put their trust in somebody like you to help support them in building that piece of armor.
it's almost it is armor. You are arming. You are armoring. You are armoring
Let's
yourself.
go with that.
You are armoring yourself for success. I mean, you're literally, the metaphor of even like putting on a uniform is very indicative of coming into the character, the identity of the person that you're portraying, right? So if you
Mm,
are, so I even think there's probably, I don't know it, but I guarantee there's some sort of study or evidence, especially particularly when it comes to like military training, that uniforms are ways of transforming the mind.
mm.
And there's a lot of, I don't know the science, but I guarantee if you Google that, there is it, because there
Oh,
is
there
a lot
will
of,
be.
yeah, there's a lot of other science that shows the way what we wear can influence our mood or our attitude. Like I can give you an example. I mean, people are really familiar with
Yeah.
Amy Cuddy's power posing talk, right? And like all her study, the information around power poses and how they influence the way that your confidence and things like that. But here's the thing. Do you feel like when you're like theoretically, I mean, and this is rhetorical you, but like when do you feel like as like powerful in your stance when you're wearing like sweatpants as you do when you're wearing tight jeans? No. Because
Yeah.
or if you have a blazer on, for example, it's really hard to slouch. And if you do, you look really sloppy versus slouching in like a hoodie is a lot easier. No one really sees it. So that's not to imply that like if street style and sweatpants are your thing that you're, you know, have no power. What that means is that if you want to feel more confident and powerful, if you put on things that force you to stand more with more height and attention, you will therefore have more power poses. you will traditionally, that's why suiting is so effective, because formal clothing requires us to stand in stiffer positions, and subconsciously it's definitely impacting us in the same way Amy Cuddy talks about power poses. So that's a little hack I always say. If you're like feeling a little less pulled together in any capacity, put on your tight clothes, because that will definitely make you stand up taller. It's
Yeah, we
it's
won't
really
go into the fact that that makes me feel chubby because I can't do them up properly and all the rest of it. That's a whole nother conversation.
well, I mean more your tight fit, your form
Oh yeah,
fitted clothes. Like put
yeah.
on the
Your
hard jeans,
your
as the
tailored,
hard pants, as they like to
yeah,
call them, the hard pants.
yeah, exactly. Your tailored suit is going to make you feel much more, yeah, presentable. And you really made me smile there, where you were saying some clothes you put on affect your mood. This jumper that I'm wearing now, for those of you that are only listening, it's got bright colours in a sort of circle yoke around the top of it. And every time I put it on, it makes me smile because it's just bright. And I always get lots of comments on it. So I know what you mean about the clothes that you wear, because then I've got suits that, back in the day when I had to go into the office every day, that yes, made me feel sort of suited and booted, as we would call it here, and ready for the day. But there were certain suits where, when I wore those suits, I was on a roll that day because that was my favorite suit. So, and I know it sounds funny to people who haven't really thought about clothes in that way, but talking to you, Nicole, it makes me think, maybe I did sort of understand the impact that that was having on me at the time, without having your amazing knowledge of what can help people to look and feel great and feel their best, and allow them to show up by definition as their best leadership self, which is really what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, most people don't even know sometimes when they themselves are like hacking themselves when it comes to the way they dress. I mean, they might have like their first date dress, or they might have like that power suit they wear to the office, or like to certain meetings. They might have their favorite interview look. But I mean, I always find that like people that say that it doesn't matter don't have the courage to take it on.
Mm,
They say it doesn't matter because they themselves don't feel confident in it, so they want it to not matter.
yeah.
Or there's some other kind of block. Maybe they have struggled to find things that fit, or whether that's because they're very petite, or they're changed sizes, or they're dealing with like postpartum, or they've been working out a lot, they've lost muscle, or whatever. Like something usually is there's usually something that makes them feel like it's out of reach for them. And if it's out of reach, they want it to not make a difference in their lives because they don't know how to solve it. So, but it is a really amazing tool. Like I tell my clients that you don't have to get dressed every day. Not, I mean, we don't all have lives that require us to put on an outfit that's anything special daily. But if you do put on an outfit, even as something as a blouse, or jeans, or your favorite pants and a button up or something, it doesn't really matter what it is. But if you just put yourself together at least 3 times a week, it will change your mood. It will change. You will change your identity. So if you see yourself as a person who has style and who gets dressed, you have to act like a person who has style and gets dressed. So sometimes we have to take the action before the belief comes, but eventually, if you make it a habit, you will eventually start to believe it. And this is one thing that like, and we also makes us accountable for ourselves, right? Like one thing I even noticed, I don't get dressed every day. Like half the time but I also know that like wearing leggings, like my mood doesn't change that much if I'm like a slumpadinka versus dressed up. Being dressed up is more fun for me, but being a slumpadinka doesn't like change my self-image perspective. But that's mostly because I think because I've been doing this work for so long, I'm so comfortable with
Mm.
myself and the physical body embodiment of myself, in a way that maybe people that aren't looking at getting dressed as like a form of art. Like I literally see it as like these are my paintbrushes, aka my sweaters, and like my body is my canvas. And so I don't necessarily connect. I did at one point when I was younger. I definitely had a lot of body
Mm.
image issues. I had a lot of challenges in my 20s. I was, I had a weight, I had challenges with with weight, and like I was an emotional eater, and like so there was a lot of that going on. But I worked through that, and now it no longer impacts my mood in a negative way. Positive way, yes, but not a negative way. However, I do notice that if I leave the house looking all schlubbed because I got to run an errand, I don't really feel inclined to talk to people. I'm like, "Ugh," like
Mm.
I don't. I don't. I mean, like it's not that I like wouldn't. Like it's not like I would like, but like I run into you or like fine, but I'm not really like looking to connect. But if I feel cute and I know I'm cute, I feel this like desire to connect with people. And I think that that's just an attitude that I have where it's like I subconsciously want to hide because I'm just like, oh, like I like the anonymity of that. I like the anonymity of that feeling sometimes. But this, so I think that like people can really think about how are their behaviors with the way they dress themselves and whether or not they get dressed impacting that. Like a lot of
Mm.
people, I bet they avoid like going to their alumni networking event because they don't think they have anything to wear.
Mm.
Like I get that, things like that. Like what professional thing are you not taking because you don't know what to wear? What you don't know what to wear at the conference. You want to move into a different industry, but the environment is so different, the culture is so different. Like you'd have to buy a whole new wardrobe. And even overcoming that in itself is so overwhelming and you hate shopping. Or your now changes sizes. So now you'd have to buy all new sizes and in a different kind of like industry appropriate attire. Oh, vey. Like I could just see it. Like, why would you bother? Why would you try
Mm.
breaking in? It's already hard enough. So I invite people to always think about like where are you holding yourself back? And because we get dressed every single day. And we don't
Mm.
live in a society where individualism is suppressed in terms of the way that we dress typically. And even if you do work in it or live in an environment that's very homogenous and you have to be kind of like the same and there's an air of like expectation, you still have to do it right. And you have to do it, if you do it even better than those around you,
Oh, I've
you
just
stand out
lost you a
even
bit.
more. Oh. Hello?
Just lost you a little bit there. You're back, I think. Yeah.
Oh. Well, I was saying
Okay.
that if you are in a homogenous environment where, a traditional professional environment, for example, if you work in where you have to be smart casual or formal business attire, it
Mm.
does offer an opportunity because when you do it really, really well, when you execute on that really, really well, then you stand out in addition to what your work does. So it's sort of
Mm.
like it's a competitive edge that you can use to your advantage. And you so it's a lot, there's a lot of opportunity to take in charge of the way that people perceive you by how you present yourself, and especially when you understand and know what your audience wants from you or wants to see in you.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating. I've just realized how long we've been chatting there, Nicole. And I honestly feel like we could talk about this stuff all day and still not get through it all or get bored. Look, absolutely fascinating. I think I've just learned a really fantastic new term. Did you say slumpadinka?
Oh
Is that
yeah, slumpadinka, yeah. I
what
mean,
a fabulous term?
so I actually like I wish I could claim it as my own, but I heard it the first time ever. I don't know where if it originated somewhere else, but I heard it the first time ever from like Oprah.
Brilliant.
And
Love
I
it.
was like ages. This was like an era ago, and I to this day I still it is the perfect embodiment of being a slumpadinka. Like you know exactly what a slumpadinka is
I
dressed like.
completely knew what you meant as soon as you said it, and I love it because, yes, I have my moments where I'm a good old slumpadinker as well. So, on that happy note, thank you so much for chatting to us today, Nicole. We have got Nicole joining us again next week on Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders, where we're going to dig into her take on game and leadership. Thanks so much, Nicole. Have a great week in between. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. Today, we listen to the leadership journey of our guest and how they got to be where they are today. Now, in the chats, we talked about all sorts of different things, and there are lots of bits and pieces in there that are going to mean something different to each and every one of you. You'll all have your own unique takeaways, so I encourage you to do a bit of reflection now and see what this might mean for your leadership moving forwards. I'm Paula Eddy Wilcox, and I look forward to seeing you on Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders, next week. Bye for now.